Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And today's comic is The Mighty Thor, issue number 181, dated October 1970. This is an issue of Thor that's fairly noteworthy, and that's simply because it was drawn by Neal Adams. Neal Adams had kind of volunteered to take over drawing duties of Thor when his friend John Buscema, I think, had a case of the flu. So John Buscema really couldn't finish up this storyline. Neal said, "Listen, hey buddy, I'm here for you," and he drew this 2-issue arc. It's somewhat interesting in that Neal Adams was an admirer of John Buscema, and he drew the comic book in the style of John Buscema. So basically, he just kind of copied John Buscema's style. You could definitely see Neal Adams in it, although he is trying to draw this the way, say, John Buscema would draw it. In addition, Joe Stennett is the inker, and as I mentioned in another issue, inked by him. He's a very strong inker. He's more of an embellisher than inker, because he definitely puts his style in his comics. Joe Stennett, he is a legendary inker, so it's kind of a positive. But these 2 issues really did not look like Neal Adams comic books. Neal Adams was fine with actually using other artists' style. He had talked about the first comic book he had drawn. I think it was in Archie Comics. And he basically just grabbed an issue off the newsstand and just kind of drew the comic in that style. Neal was a guy who believed that, if you completed the job and you got paid, it's okay, however, whatever methods you used.
By any means necessary.
So he was fine. He would actually encourage artists to do this, saying, listen, you're there to, get a paycheck. And that's not necessarily a cheat, because believe me, the guy who drew that comic that you're cheating from, he cheated from someone else. The cover, I don't know whether it's a Neal Adams cover. It doesn't look like a Neal Adams cover. And it doesn't really look like a John Buscema cover either. So I'm not sure. Maybe Joe kind of, maybe he's the guy who drew this cover. We're told that the story is one god must fall, and we see Thor. He's in the UN. He's throwing a fit here, and he's saying, "No one can stop me. I have power endowed to rule the world." And then we see Thor's best friend, Balder. He's hanging on for dear life with one hand while he has a sword in the other, ready to hack off the hand that is wielding the hammer. So Thor's saying, "Listen, as long as I got this hammer in my hand, I can rule the world." And Balor's saying, "You know what? I'm going to take that hand off." And Balor's saying, "You'll never prevail. Not while one Asgardian lives." And then we're told, I think, by the I don't know what they call it, the supreme leader of the UN. "Run clear, UN. Run for your lives. It's God versus God." I don't know if Balder was really that well known. I mean, he's well known in Asgard. He's kind of like Thor's best friend. But I'm not sure even the guys in the UN would recognize Balder here. But I'm going to get into the story. And I'm going to start just going directly to the splash page. Again, the title is One God Must Fall. We will be getting a recap on what had occurred in the previous story. Because when looking at the cover, obviously this is atypical behavior from Thor. But once we know the genesis of the story, it makes sense. the story, I enjoyed this comic. I normally don't really enjoy Thor's solo adventures. I like Thor, and I even like the Asgardian characters. The problem is I didn't like Asgard, or the drama that was going on in Asgard. I didn't care about Asgard. So while I was fine with these characters, I didn't really enjoy the setting that they operated in. But this story is fine. It's a two-parter. It wraps up. It definitely contradicts Thor's. What would we say? What's that word? The story does violate Thor's continuity. In that, the thing is that Thor can only wield the hammer when he's worthy, and in this story, they make it clear that he's not worthy to wield the hammer. And technically, the story, this arc should have ended very quickly. But again, Stan Lee's writing this; he doesn't care at this point. They just want to get this comic book out. It is entertaining, despite the fact that they really don't care about their own continuity. And I had mentioned the creative team already. Stan Lee had wrote this. Neal Adams was the artist. And inking is Joe Stanat. So we see the splash page. We see Loki, and he's encased in ice here, as he is in Mephisto's domain. So this is basically the devil. So he's the devil, but they're not necessarily calling him the devil. It's weird because you had Mephisto, but in Son of Satan, you also had Satan. So they were never really clear. I think what happened is that when they were using one character, they just totally forgot about the other character. But Son of Satan wasn't created yet. So we see Loki. He's encased in ice. He's in Mephisto's domain. We see Mephisto, who is in a very, very formidable opponent. He's in Odin's level of power, which is, beyond even what, Thor is. And we see members of Thor's cronies from Asgard. And the members are the Warriors 3, which is Fandral, Hogan the Grim, and Volstar. And we see Lady Sif here. Lady Sif is the one who is carrying that romantic torch for Thor. In the early Thor comics, he was in love with Jane Foster, who is a human. But at the same time, he had this long-time romance with Lady Sif. And it created kind of this weird kind of like romantic triangle that they couldn't really resolve when I was reading these comics. Lady Sif, she's a formidable... Let me fix that. Lady Sif, she's a formidable individual. She fights as well as any guy in Asgard. She's super powerful. She's incredibly beautiful. She sort of has that Jacqueline Kennedy, Jennifer Connelly look to her. And on Earth, Balor is there. So, like, all of Thor's cronies are involved with this. And what we are being told in these dialogue boxes is that this is the body of Loki, but it's being inhabited by the soul of Thor. So they're saying, even though you are seeing Loki, it's really Thor that is being encased in ice here. And turn the page. So as I mentioned, the Asgardians, they bum rush Mephisto. Now Mephisto is an incredibly formidable opponent on his own, but he's in his own domain, so he's even more powerful than he normally is, and he's kind of mocking the Asgardians because even though they're powerful individuals, they're really not a match for Mephisto, because it'd be like these guys facing off against Odin here. So we see the main members, they're using their weaponry, which is swords and maces. It's not really going well for them. We see Vostok here. Vostok's sort of the comic relief of the Warriors 3 here. He's a guy who has a good heart. He puts effort into his fights. He's not particularly skilled as a fighter. But nevertheless, he's a big guy. He does have the power of a god. He is kind of a clumsy guy. So usually he'll win his fights, not necessarily because he's the best swordsman. It's because he'll fall on his opponent and flatten him to the ground. Vostok, he's behind the others. But nevertheless, he's trying to mock Mephisto. Mephisto's not having any of this. He sees this fat, bloated buffoon here. He's saying, "Get out of here. Dude, seriously, I'm offended. I don't want to hear you, and I don't want to see you. Get the fuck out of my way." And Mephisto just kind of just uses a simple spell to kind of just get rid of him. He's saying, "Listen, in terms of being a fighter, this guy's not a problem, but at the same time, I don't want to hear him either." So the thing is that with Vostok gone, Mephisto also disappears too. So the two of them vanish, and this leaves the remaining warriors to look for both Mephisto and to find Vostok. At the same time, they also have to rescue the body of Loki. Now these four, they already know that Thor is in that body. So even though they see Loki, they know Thor is the one who is being imprisoned at this point. But nevertheless, they can't do anything to break out Thor of this encasing, this ice encasing, because once again, it's one that was created by Mephisto and his spells are like way too powerful for these three. Thor, he can't move, but nevertheless he can think, and he knows what's going on here, and he's realizing how helpless he is at this point. You can turn the page. So at this point, we basically get a flashback or a retelling of what happened in the previous issue, which is also drawn by Neal Adams. And apparently, Thor had encountered Loki. Loki had a mystic clay that trapped and engulfed Thor in it. And this mystic clay, he was able to reshape the two of them, Loki and Thor. And eventually what had happened is that Loki had possessed Thor's body, and Thor is drawn really nicely here. And Thor is kind of stuck in Loki's body at this point. So there's this switch of identity. Odin, who was angry at Loki at the time, he had banished Loki out of Asgard because Loki wasn't supposed to be there. But the thing is, unbeknownst to Odin, he was actually banishing Thor because Thor was inhabiting this body. So that's why Thor in the body of Loki is in Mephisto's realm, because that was Odin's punishment. You can turn the page. And we're going to take a look at the first ad here. And it's for Levi's jeans. Jeans were just starting to be normalized as a regular clothing garment. That's kind of started in the 50s. If you were someone who wore jeans in the 1930s, 1940s, even going into the 50s and 60s, That was a sign that you were poor, because only poor people bought jeans at that time, and they weren't regarded as a fashion statement at the time. It was a sign of poverty, that if you had to wear jeans, you were really poor. And it was really around this time where the jean company saying, listen, we can normalize wearing jeans, which are probably the garment, the pants most men wear today. So anyway, this adds in story Jim Driscoll in Danger on the Field. So we see Jim, he's watching this college football game, high school game, I should say, having a lot of fun. And then suddenly, a small little girl wanders onto the field. People are very concerned. This is a little girl. There's a football game going on. You have all these big masculine men, and you have this small child. They're not thinking that. But nevertheless, they're thinking this girl, might get hit. So Jim jumps into action, and he's saying, "I better try to rescue her." Now, the players and the coaches, they're aware that this young, small little girl is on the field. They run the play anyway. They run the play anyway. No one thinks, hey, maybe we should stop for a moment because there's someone on the field who shouldn't belong there. No, they run the play. However, before any of the players can get near her, and they get really close to her, Jim is running into action. He grabs her, and he runs to the sideline. Then later on, I think one of the coaches saying, that was sure heroic of you, Jim. And Big Joe, my star player, he wants to say thank you for what you did. Jim should say, why the fuck did you still run that play, knowing that little girl was there? We don't get an answer. So Jim goes into the locker room. It turns out the star quarterback, that was his little sister. He realizes, hey, my little sister's kind of a dumbass here. They realized that most of the crowd was probably saying, hey, she should have known better. Just hit her. It's okay. Teach her a lesson. But the quarterback's saying, listen, that was a very brave thing you did. You saved my sister. Jim should be saying, hey, why the fuck did you run that play knowing that she's on the field? And the guy says, listen, you're wearing jeans. I'm wearing jeans. You look mighty fine in them jeans. And, there's a connection between us. And that's it. That's what they're saying. This is how they're appealing to high school kids. Gonna turn the page. We go back to the story. We see some of the members of the Warriors 3. Fandrill, who is based on Errol Flynn. And we see Hogarth the Grim. These are two very brave guys. They're trying to strike back against Mephisto. This panel is a little confusing as to what exactly is going on. I know what Neal Adams was going for. I don't think this panel particularly worked well. But what's happening is that Mephisto is binding strings on these two men, these two gods here. And then we see a larger image of Mephisto, and he's treating the two gods as though they were puppets. So these are two very powerful individuals who view themselves as gods, even though no one prays to them. But nevertheless, as far as Mephisto is concerned, these are two harmless puppets here. And that's how he's treating them. We see Lady Sif, while Mephisto is currently occupied with these two men, Lady Sif, she's gonna try to free Thor here. Lady Sif, she looks terrific here. She is sporting double D's here. She has this nice tight outfit here, and she has as much courage as any man. And she's saying, "Don't worry, my love. I'll free you." She uses her sword, but nevertheless, again, this casing is too powerful even for her. Turn the page. Now the thing is with the body switch, they also inherited each other's powers. So Loki is currently occupying the body of Thor, which means he has the powers that Thor has. But at the same turn, Thor also has the powers that Loki has. Now, they're two different power sets, to be sure. Thor has kind of a good intuitive idea about Loki. They faced off a lot. He knows how Loki can access his powers. He has a good idea of the type of spells he can use. Doesn't mean that he's well practiced in them, but nevertheless, it is functional. So it's not like, he's stuck in Loki's body. He said, oh my God, I'm this ugly guy now after looking like Mr. GQ superhero. But Thor knows that, he can help things. And one of the things he's noticing is that while Lady Sif's sword and courage and power isn't enough to break the encasing, Thor notices another creature, not as beautiful as Lady Sif, who could possibly break this ice encasing. And it turns out it's a dweller in the domain of Mephisto, kind of like this dinosaur-like creature. And what Thor does is that he levitates the sword out of Lady Sif's hands and directs it toward one of these large dinosaur-like creatures who kind of is living in these kind of demon pits. So the thing is, the dinosaur creature here, the large lizard creature, is stabbed in the neck with the sword. It doesn't kill the creature, but it pisses it off. So this fiery creature is pissed off and kind of like looking in the direction of where the sword came from, figured that it was this being that's encased in this ice. That individual is responsible. That creature is going to attack that figure. Lady Sif kind of notices this. She's concerned because Thor can't directly communicate with her. She doesn't really know why her sword had kind of ripped itself from her hands. She kind of had an idea, but she wasn't 100% sure. The flame creature engulfs the ice casing that Thor is in. I'm going to turn the page. And we see the creature is generating so much heat that even Mephisto's spell is kind of buckling here. So the intensity of the heat is enough to melt the encasing that Thor is currently in. Well, I'm going to call him Thor, even though he's in the body of Loki. And Lady Sif, she's starting to see what's going on here. She notices, okay, this is what my man, is going to do. And finally, the creature melts enough of the ice encasing that Thor can use Loki's powers to free himself at this point. And Thor, he's in the fight here. He returns Lady Sif's sword to her, Lady Sif's kind of reminding him that, hey, you're trapped in Loki's body. I don't really find Loki that attractive. We need to fix this fast. And Thor's like, yeah, I know we need to fix this fast. And Thor is saying he is back in the fight, and he is going to do everything he can to correct this issue. Turn the page. And we are at the Mighty Marvel checklist. And I always enjoy looking at these. So this is an in-house ad. And then underneath it is Marvel Mania. I'll talk a little about that. So what was out on the newsstand at this time? Fantastic Four was up to issue number 104. So this is the first arc of the Fantastic Four without Jack Kirby. So this must have been a surprise to the kids. I actually kind of was able to understand what the kids went. Because while I was still buying the Fantastic Four new, I was also buying Marvel's Greatest Comics. And with Marvel's Greatest Comics, it was always Jack Kirby artwork. And I do remember buying that first issue of Marvel's Greatest Comics that did not have Jack Kirby's artwork. And it was kind of a strange, it was a strange feeling for me. Even though that issue had, been out like probably about 10 years earlier. Spider-Man is up to issue 90. I think that's when he goes to England. They're not really describing it particularly well. Oh no, that was when Captain Stacy died. I remember that one. Avengers, they're up to 81. This is Red Wolf. That again was a weird issue in that you had Earth's mightiest heroes, and they're basically like in this one-on-one match with a guy and his dog, like a boy and his dog. Captain America's up to 131. This is a kind of a return of Bucky, but it turns out that it's kind of like a fake Bucky. Hulk 133. He's up against a dictator called Draxton, which I guess is kind of similar to the Moonraker villain, Drax. Daredevil number 69, that has the Black Panther in it. I never really got into Daredevil, at least pre-Frank Miller. I love the Frank Miller issues, but yeah, prior to Frank Miller, Daredevil was kind of like an on and off character. Iron Man's up to 31. Again, I never really gravitated toward Iron Man's solo adventures, even though I liked him in the Avengers. The Submariner, 31. I liked the later issues of the Submariner. I thought they were really interesting. But some of the earlier adventures I didn't really care for too much. Amazing Avengers number 3. This is when it was the Inhumans and the Black Widow. Neal Adams would eventually draw a couple of these issues a few months later. I think this was the last Jack Kirby issue that he had done in Marvel when he first left. I was never a fan of the Inhumans. Their society was just so dysfunctional, in my opinion. Tower of Shadows number 8. Again, that's an anthology. They're not telling you. Sergeant Fury 81. I didn't really like the War comics. Then there's some giant size issues here, king size issues. Again, Marvel's offering these reprints at a higher price because again, they wanted their fans to spend more money. And there's some other stuff on sale, like some of the Western and the I guess the girl-driven titles like Mad About Millie. They're also telling you still on sale is Silver Surfer number 18. I think that was drawn by Jack Kirby. Conan number 1, the first issue of Conan. I definitely would have picked that one up. Spoof number 1, that's their way of trying to compete with Mad Magazine. Didn't go well. Astonishing Tales number 2. I'm going to be looking at Astonishing Tales number 5 soon. This is when Wally Wood came back. Wally Wood was an amazing artist. He had worked for Mad Magazine. He had done stuff with other comic book companies like Tower, and he had done some early Marvels like with Daredevil. Those were really good issues. Did some amazing artwork. Wally was kind of a troubled guy. He had a problem with alcohol. He was a sailor, so kind of like that life really kind of caught up with him. But nevertheless, he still try. He was a guy who could make money from his art, and that's what he was trying to do. Chamber of Darkness number 7, again anthology. See what's going on here. Not much. if you were at the newsstand, you're definitely buying this issue, and you're definitely buying Conan #1. And we see underneath is Marvel Mania. This is kind of a fan magazine. This wasn't owned by Marvel, but Marvel licensed their characters to this guy who ran Marvel Mania. He was a businessman who was very unethical, but he was able to flim-flam Stan Lee, which honestly was not that difficult to do. One of the things they would do is the guy would sell original art from the artist, but because he was terrible at paying them, the artist would say, "Hey, I want my artwork back," and he's saying, "Well, we can't find it," even though it'd be on the walls in his office. And what had happened was that Mark Evander worked for this company, and he wrote about it. And he was also friends with Jack Kirby, so to get back some of Jack Kirby's artwork, when the boss left the office, Mark Evander would call Jack Kirby, and that's when Jack Kirby would show up at the office. And that was the excuse given, because the guy's going to notice that this artwork's gone, and Mark's saying, "Oh, Jack just happened to show up, and he just happened to be here, and you weren't here," and I guess serendipity. But yeah, if you were to send this guy any money, it would be iffy if you got anything back from him. Turn the page. Kind of an ad for bodybuilders. This is when this was starting to become popular at the time. I think it became popular in the early '60s when a guy called Steve Reeves was the one of the first guys who kind of turned bodybuilding into kind of a financial flex with his really bad acting in some of these Hercules movies. I think there were also other guys like Jack LaLanne and Joe Wielder. Turn the page. Actually, I think that was a Joe Wielder ad. So we're going back to the story. And it's a tale of two supervillains who are ranting megalomatically, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. We see Mephisto here. And he is just crowing about how much these Asgardians, they have no chance against him. And at this point, he is winning kind of easily here at this point, even with Loki free. Next, we see Thor, and he's at the UN. Now, Thor's body is being inhabited by Loki. So this is basically Loki ranting in the body of Thor. I do have to say, this is really subpar work here. This is not Neal Adams' work. The proportions, the body, the look. Neal probably drew the initial layout. I figured the rest was finished by Joe. This is not good artwork, to be honest here. But nevertheless, it is what it is. So it's sort of like, both Loki and Mephisto. Mephisto is dominating his domain, and Loki is dominating this domain, which is Midgard, or Earth. We see the soldiers here. They're trying to break in. This looks more like Neal Adams' artwork. There's an invisible force field that's preventing the military from entering the building here. Thor is at the UN at this point. He's basically saying, "Listen, I'm taking over. I'm controlling the world." That seems like something that's not really should be a goal of a supervillain, because they're gonna have to rework the entire system, the entire global system. I'm not sure whether Loki, if he was to become ruler of the world, would want to spend his time in meetings discussing, okay, how do we deal with currency at this point? Whose pictures get on it? Loki's going to say, well, yeah, they're going to have Loki's picture on it. Even though he's in the body of Thor. So that's going to create problems for him. The other guys, they're going to worry about the exchange rates. It's just going to be a mess. Turn the page. So anyway, we see the UN delegates. They're complaining about this. They're like, "How dare you do this? We're gonna stand up to you. the superpowered being, when in fact the UN delegates would be quite the opposite. They'd be the spineless guys who were kind of saying, we'll follow you, yes master, yes master, type of yes men. But Loki's hearing this. He's saying, "Listen, I'm just hearing a bunch of prattling here. I don't have to take this stuff seriously." And he starts to show off his powers as Thor by, he's the god of thunder, so he creates a thunder and lightning storm here in the main chamber of the United Nations. So he's impressing all these type of delegates. They're like, they don't know what to do or how to handle this situation. There's no type of UN resolution that they can pass that would stop this. Loki here, he's still flexing as Thor. He's saying, "Listen, I am Thor. Hear me roar." But there is someone calling him a fake and an imposter in Elizabethan English, and it turns out to be Balder. This is Thor's best friend. Of course, obviously Loki's going to recognize him. Balder also knows that Loki is inhabiting this body. But the rest of the UN delegates don't, and nor does the TV audience who is watching this. Going to turn the page. So then we see Thor. He strikes out against Balder here. He's using his hammer here, and but the thing is that while Thor in Loki's body, he has a good idea of how to handle the power. He's not practiced in the power that body is used to. So Thor is kind of a little bit hamstrung by this, that he's not familiar with that power set. And the same can be said for Loki. Loki is inhabiting the power of Thor, but he's not used to accessing Thor's powers. He knows Thor's powers. He knows how to access them, but he's not smooth or skilled with those powers. So Balor has a bit of a handicap. Thor has a bit of a handicap against Ballard, in that his reflexes and his movements are going to be a little slower. He's going to telegraph things that Thor wouldn't telegraph. So Balor here, he kind of easily kind of slips that power ray that Thor is using. And he's also noting that, hey, listen, you may be as powerful as Thor, but you're not as skilled as Thor. So, things are kind of evening out here. And Balor's saying, listen, you're not the equal of Thor. Thor can kick your ass. And of course, obviously, this bothers Loki, who's very egotistical. So what happens here is that Loki is going to use something that is familiar to him. So he's going to use a spell that he knows that he can craft, and he's going to use this against Balder here. And then he tries to deliver that spell against Balder here. And, he brings the hands down, and we turn the page. And there's an ad here. It's for Grit magazine. Don't need to look at it. The only thing that's kind of funny is the kid here in this picture. He looks 10 years old. It looks like he's about to go to Vietnam, though, with that crew cut. So turn the page. We go back to the story, and nothing happens. There's no spell. Loki's confused as to why there's no spell here. And the reason is that he's in Thor's body. So Loki can't use the powers that he's familiar with at this point. So this is unintended consequences for Loki. But the thing that Balor wanted was when Loki was attempting to use his spell, he said that he was Loki. He gave up the game because all these UN delegates, all the people watching on TV, they think this is Thor. But they heard Thor saying, I'm really Loki in Thor's body. So the thing is that when this comic concludes, the people will know that, hey, this is not really Thor. We can trust this guy again. He was the only long-haired guy that Middle America trusted. So that's sort of how they set up. This will wrap up nicely, and this story does wrap up very cleanly. Stan Lee, I think at this time, was tuning out of comics, and he was writing stories that kind of like, there was a lot of plot convenience in them. I think the issue of Thor that I had reviewed when he's facing off against the Abomination, it had a lot of plot convenience. So it was something that Stan could write, and well, Stan, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. I'll handle it. Don't worry about it. That was sort of where Stan Lee was at the time. But the thing is that Loki's not defeated here because he's still in the body of Thor. He says, "Listen, I'll figure it out how to use Thor's powers, but in that meanwhile, I'm still stronger than you. So even by accident, I can still beat you." So, but Thor is also saying, I don't care that people know I'm Loki. I still want to take over here. So then we go back to Mephisto's realm. We see that Thor is using Loki's powers to protect his friends. Now, at this point, Volstagg has been dismissed to some part of Mephisto's reign, so he's probably crapping in his pants. But Lady Sif, Vandrel, and Hogan the Grim, they're being protected by Loki's spell. Mephisto is not impressed because he's saying, "Listen, when I'm here in my realm, I'm just as powerful as Odin. Odin himself would have huge problems with me. So you think these spells bother me? Huh, you gotta be kidding." Thor, who is the good boy of the family, he's saying, you don't say stuff about my daddy that way. And, how dare you say things about you're as good as my daddy. And Thor has a plan. He finally figures out what he can do to end Mephisto here. Gonna turn the page. And Thor's like channeling Cindy Brady. And he says, "I'm gonna use goodness against you. I'm gonna take goodness and I'm gonna use that goodness." And what Thor does is that he shrinks himself physically. So spiritually, more of his aura is there. So basically, Thor is using his personal aura against Mephisto. And by shrinking his body, his aura, which isn't shrinking, seems larger and larger and larger. And this goodness is just like kryptonite to Mephisto. Mephisto's seeing Thor's the kid who never rips the tag off the mattress. He's the guy who does everything right. And when he joins the record clubs, he actually sends all the money that is due rather than committing mail fraud. And Odin just can't stand. I mean, not Odin. Mephisto can't stand this. There's no defense against this. He's saying, "God damn kid, you're corny, and I can't stand this corniness." And he can't stomach any more of it. And he needs to get rid of this element from his domain. I'm gonna turn the page. Now here, this page is kind of a there was some contention about this type of page and the way it was laid out, in that you had half the page was the story, and then you would have an ad underneath it. And there actually is a letter complaining about that. So what's happening here, Mephisto is being sickened by the goodness of Thor's aura. And the thing is, he gives up. He cries uncle. He says, listen, just get out of here. I'll give you what you want. So the first thing he does, he frees Thor and his friends. But then there's Volstagg, because Volstagg was banished by Mephisto. Mephisto says, listen, you could take this buffoon away. I was just going to use him, for parties, kind of like play around with this fatso guy. But yeah, if you want this worthless guy, you can have him too. Volstagg, again, he was the guy with the fake posturing, where he was the guy who acted like he was Thor. Everyone knew it was an act, but they found this endearing, this buffoonery endearing. And on the bottom of this page is a ad, the karate ad. There's nothing that stands out about it. We'll turn the page. So we see another of these split pages. Underneath is an ad for coins, but above it is the story. It's one panel where these guys have won. And Thor's asking about Volstagg, about his experience being banished, because they were concerned about his friend. And they're asking, were you scared? Were you worried? Because we're kind of smelling something here. We're smelling something that we normally associate with toddlers. And when we smell this with adults, we know they were really scared. Volstagg's saying, no, that wasn't me. That was Mephisto who was afraid of me. And then, Volstagg is going through his bravado thing, so they know he's okay. Fandral, he's having a little fun with Volstagg by mentioning, hey, by the way, Mephisto's still around here. If you want a rematch with him, and Volstagg is saying, oh, no, you guys, you don't want to see that, because I'll beat the crap out of him. Yeah, but can we leave now? Now, what's interesting about this drawing here, and it's pretty well drawn, I love Lady Sif's face. She has this look on her face. It reminds me of Jennifer Connelly in Career Opportunities. I never thought I'd meet a girl like you. If you watch the video of her and you just see that's those stares, this is what she looks like here. And I saw Jennifer Connelly in real life once. She is absolutely gorgeous. Turn the page. So then they're allowed to leave Mephisto's realm, and they head to the bridge, the Rainbow Bridge of Asgard. And there they're met with Heimdall. I think that's what he called. He's basically the hall monitor of Asgard. This poor guy, he's stuck on this bridge, and he knows everything, even though he's completely physically separated. He's just stuck in hall monitor duty here. Now, because Heimdall sees Loki's body, he's not going to allow Thor into Asgard. So because Odin had banished Thor. Odin had banished Loki from Asgard, so he can't get past Helmut at this point. The others can. So the thing is, hopefully these guys are going to try to get in contact with Odin. Odin knows these guys; they're kind of cronies, but sometimes Odin kind of keeps them at a distance. So how quickly they'll get an audience with Odin is kind of debatable at this point. Thor, at this point, he says, listen, I want to face off against Loki on Earth so we can re-switch our bodies here. Lady Sif, she's looking at Thor, and she's saying, listen, I love you for who you are, but I have to be honest, if you're stuck in this body, it might be a problem for me. If we're getting busy, you might have to put that paper bag on you. But Thor doesn't think it's going to get to that, so he leaves for Earth here. Now we see Odin here, and Odin's in his chamber here with his advisor. The advisor is kind of, he knows, he's just finding out what's happened. He's kind of approaching this subject gently to Odin, because it's kind of like, when your leader is going through dementia, he doesn't want to be reminded that he's going through it. Something we're currently going through in the United States. So he's trying to tell Odin gently about what's going on with the body switch, but Odin's a step ahead of him, saying, "Listen, I already know this. And I want my two sons to duke it out." Odin, not a great dad, kind of screwing around with both his sons' heads here. But nevertheless, the thing is, they don't have to tell Odin about the body switch. He already knows. But he's not really doing anything about it either. I'm going to turn the page. So we go back to the UN, and we see that Loki was able to defeat Balor. Balor's a very powerful guy. He's a skilled warrior. He has the heart of a warrior. But, he's up against basically the power of Thor. And even a rusty Thor is simply too much for him. However, a bubble is engulfing Thor, and it's taking him out of the UN. Now, the thing is that Loki is familiar with this type of bubble, because it's the type of bubble he would conjure up. So he knows now that he's going to be facing his brother, but he's not going to be facing him at the UN. He's going to be facing him at this construction site. So this is going to be where their final battle is going to be held here. I'm not sure whether it kind of doesn't give either one of them an edge. I mean, at this point, kind of the mafia was controlling the construction trades at this time, but they're kind of not inclined to get involved in this type of fight. So these two guys, they're just going to slug it out. And Thor goes on the offense here. He has a plan. What he wants is for his brother to throw the hammer. And once the hammer is out of his hands, he's going to try to run out the clock so 60 seconds has passed. And when those 60 seconds have passed, that's when the hammer of... When Thor isn't holding the hammer, after 60 seconds, then the transformation from Thor to Donald Blake occurs. And Thor is counting on that transformation to fix the body switch. Sort of like that shock. It's like a rebooting, so to speak. So at this point, Loki is just doing everything he can to get his brother to throw his hammer. First he throws a large boulder at him, but the thing is that Thor just sort of uses the hammer as a nutcracker and kind of breaks the boulder with some ease. Going to turn the page. We're coming across an ad here. You can get pet baby raccoons. Don't send raccoons through the mail, number one. Do not offer raccoons as pets. They are not domesticated, although they in certain situations they will kind of bond with humans, but they're not suitable pets. If you have dogs or cats, the raccoons will rip them apart. They will rip your kids apart. They will. If you think a leopard will eat your face, oh boy, a raccoon will do all types of business to it. You have to be careful about how you treat them, because they have long memories. They will remember which person treated them nice and which didn't. And they believe in revenge. There are very few animals outside of humans who believe in revenge. Raccoons are one of them. And they have sharp teeth and they have sharp claws. Don't have them as pets. Even though I think there are some people who do. Also skunks. There are some people who apparently have skunks as pets too. And they're the same way. They kind of will bond with humans, some of them, but not good. Here's a booklet on how to be a computer programmer. This is early. they're probably using one of those early languages like Fortran or something like that. Magic, how you can have a He-Man voice. So there's a booklet on telling you how to improve your voice. That usually doesn't work. You can play guitar in 7 days or your money back. Yeah, you can play the guitar, just play it badly. Other things, you can get a booklet on how to be a better bowler. Some of these were real rip-offs. Like, for example, they would have an ad on how to start a business stuffing envelopes. And then, you'd ask for a booklet on how to do it. And you'd get like a small one-page thing that says, okay, open an ad that says that you will stuff envelopes. And that was like the entire business plan. So I'm going to turn the page. And we see a full-page image of Thor lifting up this... it looks like, I forgot what these are called. These cranes here. So Neal Adams, I guess he kind of like wanted to finish this up quickly. He expended a whole page just drawing this crane here with Thor holding it underneath, while Thor is like kind of bragging, or Loki's bragging about, hey, look at what I can lift. And guess where I'm throwing this? I'm going to turn the page. The art is okay. It's fine. You do see a little Neal Adams. It's mostly Neal Adams in the layouts, and not necessarily the finished work here. He was trying to draw this like John Buscema would draw it. But I think there's a lot of Joe Sinnott in this. I don't think Neal Adams and Joe Sinnott, their styles matched well. When Neal Adams did Thor in Amazing Adventures with the Inhumans, that art was really great. Although, again, suffered from bad inking from John Vanderpool. So anyway, Thor gets out of the way. He's using this. Thor is, and anyway, Thor gets out of the way here. He's kind of swinging along here on the equipment. He's using the equipment. Once again, Thor has a plan. He wants Loki to throw that hammer, and he keeps trying to entice him, but Loki's not going for it. He's just simply holding on to the hammer. But he is using the hammer defensively, but he's not throwing it. We see Loki. He's driving a bulldozer. He's heading straight for Thor. Or at least Loki and Thor's body, and now Loki is ready to throw the hammer. He's really pissed off here, and he throws the hammer. He destroys the bulldozer, but Thor's okay with this because this is what he wants. Now at this point, he just has to run out the clock. I turn the page. The story is actually moving pretty quickly here. So anyway, we see the hammer. It's embedded into part of the quarry here. Thor, I should say, in the body of Loki. He jumps out of the vehicle. He heads for Thor. So at this point, it's kind of a wrestling match. Loki, again, he's not used to like physically using his hands. He's a guy whose body isn't designed for that, even though it has Asgardian strength. But he's taking advantage of Thor's body, and he's belting his own body. This is a little odd because Loki's a guy with a big ego. He probably thinks he's a good-looking guy, even though no one else does, and he's kind of beating himself up. So this I would think this would create some type of narcissistic wound in Loki's mind, that he's beating himself up. But nevertheless, I think he's prepared to have this body for a lifetime. Thor, he realizes that this body cannot take this beating, but he has to, because he has to run out the clock. He has to get those 60 seconds of his brother not having the hammer. And the brother's just beating him up, going on and on. He's, Thor saying, I can't stop, I can't fail. This is the big Rocky moment. Loki's kind of Apollo Creed, he's taking over the fight, and he's starting to beat up on him. And he's saying, why are you continuing? Why are you continuing? This is the thing. Loki's kind of a big pussy. So when the fight gets too much for him, he runs. And Loki can't understand why Thor isn't running. He's saying, listen, I'm beating the crap out of you. You should be, kind of like sniveling like a little puppy and running to your room. That's not happening. Thor is hanging on to this fight. And I'm going to turn the page. And we see another ad. We're going to see what... Hopefully there are no small animals being mailed. Yeah, there's a thing for model rockets here. I remember my older cousin had these. You can fly them in the air, and then they had a little parachute thing once the two parts disconnected. And you can be a dental assistant, because guys who read comic books all day, you want them working on your teeth. Turn the page. We have another ad here. Again, they're selling other animals. Seahorses here. Oh, you can get squirrel monkeys. Wow. Oh man, the things they would put in the mail. And they're selling these animals for $13. Jim Jones of Jonestown, the Kool-Aid. I remember that incident. He one of his jobs was that he would sell monkeys door to door. Monkeys you really don't want as pets. One, not only will they crap in your apartment, they will throw the crap at you. Monkeys are chaos agents. They will take stuff from you. They will cause all types of problems for you. And you're putting this one in the mail. So this monkey will come traumatized. There's also seahorses you can buy. You can build go-karts, which were big then. You can electric guitars here. They're saying it's a factory closeout. I guess these are guitars that didn't sell, and they're looking to get rid of them. And there's a few other things here. Spy camera. And I'm going to turn the page. So anyway, what happens is 60 seconds has passed. The hammer reverts back to Donald Blake's walking stick, which means that Donald Blake has returned to Earth. And because of this reboot, the essence of Loki, the intelligence and whatnot, is separated because the body of Thor isn't there. So, but Loki's still there. So Loki's suddenly in this this sort of mystic form, and his aura is being returned to his body, and Thor's aura is leaving Loki's body and going into Donald Blake's body. And this is possible because Donald Blake actually doesn't exist. Donald Blake is a created avatar created by Odin. It's a false identity. So Donald Blake actually doesn't have any essence per se. He's simply a living caricature of what Odin created, which is a decent guy, which is what he wanted Thor to be. Because this is the reason why Donald Blake existed, is that he wanted his son, which he knew would probably be more powerful than him someday. He wanted his son to learn humility. So he said, I'm going to put you in this earth body. You're going to learn. Even though this is a different identity, you will still learn from this character. And this way you will be a better god. So Donald Blake is basically Thor, but Thor in a human form and maybe not as arrogant. Nevertheless, the aura of Thor is entering into Donald Blake's body. There's still a problem though. They got to get the walking stick, so they don't want Loki to get it again. and and also, like, Loki can kill Donald Blake. Donald Blake doesn't have just Thor's humility, as a learning tool and his avatar. This avatar is vulnerable to being killed, and that would have obviously a bad effect on Thor. So the thing is, Donald Blake, he rushes for the walking stick. He grabs it once again. Turn the page. And then he does, again, Neal Adams is also kind of drawing on Jack Kirby here. You see a little bit of Jack Kirby here. Having Joe Sinnott ink it obviously helps. He hits the stick on the ground, and he transforms back into the god of thunder. Thor's on top now. That beating that Thor had to take as Loki, that pain is gone, and Loki is feeling that pain, and Loki is now feeling what it's like to have the god of thunder completely unleashed. Loki here, he might be missing some teeth here. He's going to need some dental work. He has a nasty black eye here. Loki knows he's beaten at this point. And he says, listen, I may be beaten, but I'm not defeated. And I'll come back and I'll get even with you. And then Thor kind of flies off because everything's fixed now. And again, this is how Stan Lee wanted it. He can finish up the story. Everybody in the world knows that of the body switch. Odin knows what's going on. So there's no need to explain this stuff for a later issue. Again, Stan Lee was taking a lot of plot convenience. He didn't care about Thor's continuity here because, again, the Loki was evil as fuck when he was in Thor's body. So that alone should have made, the body of Thor unworthy of that hammer. But, like I said, Stan Lee's like, listen, I got Neal Adams drawing this comic. And I'm not going to worry about that. And we're told about the next issue as Doctor Doom in it. Okay, so close to the end of this comic. The story's over. There's a few more things here. We're going to take a look at the Marvel Bullpen Bulletins. What they're talking about here are some comic awards. And apparently Marvel did very well. Roy Thomas did well. Neal Adams did well. Tom Palmer did well. A bunch of Marvel comics were selected as best stories of the year. Marvel has the best superhero, Spider-Man, the best villain, Doctor Doom, the best supporting character, Rick Jones. This sounds like Donald Trump was like running Marvel at this time. And they're saying that, hey, Dick Giordano won an award for DC. That was DC sort of getting their participatory award. But Stan's reminding, hey, Dick used to work with us too. So when the DC guy won, is what he learned in Marvel that really helped. The second item is about Gene Colan, saying that in addition to doing Captain America and Daredevil, which he did a pretty good job with both those, he's going to be working on the Black Widow in Amazing Adventures. Amazing Adventures was one of those feature comics where they would try out characters to see whether they can carry their own title. At that point, I think it was the Inhumans and Black Widow. So Gene Colan was doing some of those stories. They're talking about the 25-cent giants. They're reminding the kids, hey, you need to buy these more expensive comics so we can improve our profit margin. Then there's an item about Gary Friedrichs, how he's writing for Sergeant Fury. He's also doing Daredevil. And he also wrote a new book. He co-wrote a new book called The Pocket Encyclopedia of Rock and Roll, 1950 through 1963. So Gary was spending a little time writing a book on music or music history. The next item is about the comic we just read, is that Neal Adams will be doing the next issues of Thor. Gil Kane is going to be working with John Romita on Spider-Man. And they're going to get... and John's going to also help out with Fantastic Four with John Verputten all six of him. John Verputten was a guy who was Marvel's production guy. The job ended up killing him, along with his life. His lifestyle didn't help, but the job kind of killed him. He was in big trouble because of unintended malfeasance, financial malfeasance. He would basically, what was happening, he was an easy touch. So guys would ask for advances on stories that they didn't actually do. John Verputten wanted to help his friends out. He was a guy who didn't like saying no. So he paid a lot of advances to guys who ended up not turning in that work. Because John was saying, okay, I trust you, sure. Okay, Daredevil's up to issue number 72, but I'll pay you for issue 82. And I'm sure when issue 82 is around, you'll have the stuff ready. And it turned out not to be the case. And the poor guy had a heart attack. Was looking at Stan's soapbox. They're talking. He's talking. It's hard to summarize what he's saying because he doesn't say much. He's talking about the Academy of Comic Book Arts, saying that he hopes that those awards will be as considered a big a deal as like the movie awards, like the Oscars. And then we're told that Marvel is going to be having some big things coming out. Some more ads. Nothing that stands out to me. So we're going to get to the letters page. And the letters page are really interesting. But before I get to the letters page, I actually have to kind of clock out. Okay, I'm back. And yeah, it's going to be a wild one. Okay, so I'm going to go to the letters page. The hammer strikes. I'm kind of impressed with this letter, the first one. This is an extremely well-written letter, and it touches upon a lot of basically college-level concepts here, and it does so in a very intelligent way. Basically saying this guy, his name is Paul, he's from Bloomfield, New Jersey. Bloomfield, New Jersey, I think isn't that near Newark? I'm not sure. But anyway, he's saying that Thor is his favorite character in Marvel. And the reason why he likes Thor isn't necessarily Thor himself or the stories. It's the letters pages. And he says he always finds the readers that do read Thor, and when they do write in, they're very intelligent. And what he likes is the subjects they talk about. And basically, a lot of readers have been writing in about Thor existing in the modern world. Now, the thing is, the readers obviously are aware that this version of Thor differs greatly from the original myths from, I think, Norway. I'm not sure where Thor originates from, but I know somewhere in Scandinavia. But anyway, Paul here, he's talking about the fact that a lot of the readers would talk about, an actual god from that time existing in this world. Now, obviously, the Thor in Marvel's universe is sort of like commercial soy milk. I don't know if you drink it. I love it. But the soy milk that you would find on supermarket shelves differs greatly from the original soy milk that was created in China. If you drink soy milk that, as intended in China or in a Chinese restaurant, that will put hair on your chest. If you're a woman, that will put hair on your chest. It is very bitter. It is very strong. It is virtually undrinkable to Western individuals such as myself. So we take the commercial brand, which is much milder and much sweeter. And that's sort of like what was going on with Thor the mythical Thor and the Marvel Thor. This particular individual, he enjoyed those conversations that these people would have. Remember, there's no internet at the time, so this was their bulletin board. These letters, and Paul here, he's obviously well versed in what was going on with he's the Bible. He's talking about the God of the Bible, some of the differences, how the original God in the Old Testament, the old Jewish Bible, I think he was Yahweh in that one, was a very angry and vengeful guy. If you read Chick tracts when Jack Chick was alive, that's the God he liked. He was a Christian guy, Jack Chick. But he did not like the New Testament God, where he is very nice and forgiving. He liked that angry, bitter old goat in the old Jewish Bible. And in case you don't know, the Testaments are linked because the Old Testament has nothing about Jesus. The New Testament is all about Jesus. But the thing is, Jesus talks about the Old Testament all the time. So to understand what Jesus is talking about in the New Testament, you have to know the stories in the Old Testament. So that's how the two are connected. And he's describing, for example, the term put no other gods above me or ahead of me. Paul's explaining that back then, when they were using the old Jewish Bible, they acknowledged there were other gods. But they're saying you have to worship me above them. Whereas, like the New Testament interpretation of that line is basically, I'm the only God. Anyone else who claims that there's another God, that's blasphemy. So Paul's explaining how Godhood has evolved in the centuries. Because if you were to go back in time to when the Old Testament was kind of new, you would talk about Jesus, and those people would look at you like you have three heads. In addition to the fact that you would be speaking in English, and they speak in Aramaic or something like that. Okay, so again, he's talking about the Norse gods, how female gods were treated. And I remember when I was taking a literature course, we learned about the Odyssey and the Iliad, and the female gods were treated just like the male gods. Now, this wasn't true in real life. Men did not treat women very well, but in terms of godhood, women were considered just as equal and important as the male gods. And he's pointing this out. He's kind of bringing it back to Thor, the comic. And one of the things he's complaining about, and we saw it in this issue, what were those pages where you saw half artwork and half ads. That lasted for a little while. Eventually it became, the pages were dedicated. It was either dedicated to content or ads. But Paul doesn't like that split. Editorials answering, they said, listen, your letter was really good, and it is. But they're talking about the split in the artwork and the ads, saying, listen, we don't like it either, and we plan on changing it. But the thing is, out of necessity, we kind of have to do this. And they're also talking about Marvel Mania, and they're also talking about Roy Thomas's own fanzine, Alter Ego, which does still exist. And Roy Thomas is still a part of that. I think it's published by Tomorrows. Here's another letter. They're talking about the fact that Thor's life in his own comic is very separate from what he does in the Avengers. And what this letter writer is saying, his name is Sergeant Michael Kuhn. He's in Nebraska. He's stationed in Nebraska. He's basically saying, hey, Thor's friends would they kind of need to interact with Thor's friends in the Avengers. So he's saying that the two lives are they're too separated. Whereas, hey, Balor, and Lady Sif, during the course of their adventures, they would run into Spider-Man or they would run into Iron Man, and they're saying you should kind of like integrate those Asgardian characters into the Earth characters a little bit better. Have them having an adventure with the Avengers, or at least meeting some of the members of the team. I think Roy Thomas is basically saying that it's kind of too difficult to coordinate stuff like that. Because the thing is, that you don't want a situation where one writer is doing something that screws up the continuity of another. So Roy's basically saying that we would like to do it, but the way the production of these comics works, it would cause problems. This sometimes would cause problems with the Defenders, where if the Defenders were on an extended story arc, like when they encountered the Guardians of the Galaxy, you have to remember Hulk has his own individual comic. Doctor Strange has his own individual comic. And they would need to explain how they're able to sort of have these drawn out adventures while at the same time maintaining their solo adventures in their own comics. So the letters continue. They're still addressing Jack Kirby here, because Kirby was still in some of these. Sometimes the letters would get late, so I guess some of these letters, like talking about 176, they're from Pittsburgh. Maybe distribution wasn't so great. Here's a letter that's bringing up what seems to be a continuity flaw, where a villain had human lackeys, and the human lackeys were able to lift Thor while Thor still had his hammer on his body. And they're saying, how could these guys lift Thor and that heavy hammer at the same time? Now, the hammer was still in Thor's hand, so technically the henchmen weren't lifting the hammer, because they didn't touch the hammer. They're lifting the body that's holding the hammer. And but nevertheless, they're also explaining how can these guys lift this very heavy object and person. There's no real answer here given, other than kind of don't think about it too much. That would have been my answer. Here's another letter. It's bringing up Balor. Apparently Balder. I always say Balor, but it's Balder. Balder was killed, but he was revived by Odin. And he's saying, well, you didn't make it clear whether, Odin has the power to over life and death and bringing back the dead to the living. They're also bringing up something about the villain here, and he's coming up with an explanation as to, apparently there was an art problem, but he's saying, listen, it could be looked at this way. And they're sending the guy a no prize, saying, hey, we were lazy, we needed to get this thing out. Okay, you found a flaw, but you came up with this ass covering excuse that we can use. Another one is complaining about Stan Lee and the grammar, saying that when Fandral and Hogan use the word thou, you don't use that as to address a crowd. You use thou when it's someone you're familiar with, an individual you're familiar with, and you don't use it to address a crowd in general. So, when they said, art thou moved thy ass, it kind of creates drama, grammar problems. Stan says he's sorry, and they're offering no explanation. I've done this before. Sometimes we we would have clients who you would say, I want this explanation why this and that was done. And I would say, okay, I'm sorry for the mistake. And then I wouldn't offer any other statements because they're not needed. And that's that. We see an in-house ad for Submariner number 31. This involves the Stingray. I didn't read these Submariners, so I don't know how good this issue is. And that's about it. And that is my review of Thor, issue number 181. And I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.